welcome. This is a real much anticipated moment at our first meeting of the CRA, as we're going to call it. I'm David Gant. I was appointed by the commission to be chair of the group. And I would like very much to congratulate you. We had an awful lot of really great candidates, but you were chosen by the commission. Each one of you were chosen after quite a bit of discussion and back and forth. And we think we've got all-stars here. We appreciate that because we want to get a group that we felt could work together. You will learn today that we think we're the only group like this in the United States. So we're unique. There are of course, there are many parks places that have combined and done something, but this is the first, we believe, that a library and parks have been put together. And a lot of interesting opportunities, a lot of challenges as we set it up and we decide how we want to look, what are our rules going to be, who do we work with, what do we do. So we thought that we would start off with a retreat-like setting, more of a facilitation, and we have Lydia Altman from the School of Government. She is a facilitator extraordinaire. We're going to make her an honorary Buncombe County resident because she was actually up here last week with the Buncombe County Commissioners. So Joe Ellen and I have an opportunity to see her firsthand. We're very impressed with her, and we thank her for coming back. We thank Ed and Fran for setting things up. Thank Angie Hall for being our clerk. And we're really looking forward to doing something extraordinary for the people of Buncombe County. And I think each of you has a gift that can make that happen, a perspective, a gift, a point of view that we need. And that's why I got appointed. So we're looking forward to it. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Altman. And thank you for facilitating and coming up the hill. Next week, the leaves may be gone. Each week it's a little bit more.
I think I got to be somewhere else next week.
Well, we thank you again and mighty appreciative of you taking the time today.
Well, thank you. So here's how I sort of see my role and a little bit about me. I've been with the School of Government for about 15 years now, and it just still amazes me that not as long as apparently Eleanor said she had a class with somebody that I don't know, which I didn't think was possible because I feel like I know a lot of folks either through my work there now or my association with the school back in the day when I was in the MPA program. So, but I've worked for about 15 years and done some work in the nonprofit and government relations, which is one of the things that Mac just told me. It looks like the professor who tries to sell you their book. And I'll talk about this in just a second. But had really worked in the nonprofit world, looking at where nonprofits and governments can be kind of the yin and the yang of each other, where can they benefit from working closer together. So did some work around that. In fact, and then thought we're not really looking broad enough. We need to be thinking about the whole other folks that can really be helpful in terms of solving complex public problems. Not just businesses and not just nonprofits and governments, but also businesses, faith-based organizations, philanthropy groups, things like that. So our work kind of branched out. In the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of work with strategic planning and strategic thinking, and helping elected boards in particular, but not just elected boards, think about their role in moving what their vision is, where they want to be, and what they need to be doing in order to get there. So that's, in a nutshell, my life at the School of Government. In that work, I often, and I mean often, go and work with boards and just do some sort of pure facilitation, which is kind of the way I think about today, is, and I'll tell you a bit about the process. So I have some background, although quite frankly, I got the call about this work not too long ago. So I've done a tremendous amount of research, and I don't need to know the nuts and bolts of everything that you all are going to be about, because you got a big fat notebook for that. But I did spend some time thinking about what it is that you need to know and talking with a few folks around the table, just a handful to get a perspective on this. And so that was very helpful, kind of figuring out how to structure today. Today, I think, can be very flexible. It's technically 10 to 2, 10 to 3, with lunch provided, but you all are starting from scratch. This is pretty monumental. It's not like, as David said, there's not a lot of precedent to go by. There may be lessons learned about how other authorities work, but not necessarily in this subject matter. So sometimes I think you kind of need to kind of go slow to go fast. I mean, this is pretty important groundwork to lay. And so because of that, here are the kinds of things I thought we would talk about today. This is your time. And so I'm flexible in design. If we need to regroup and think a different way, we can. But based on what I know about where you are, what I know about new organizations, and what I know about what you said you want to talk about, here's my thought about today. A little bit of just getting started. And I think that's critically important as a brand new group coming together to work. Some things that really do help new groups work better together. There's I'll go there later, I'm sure. Never mind. Keep myself straight on the agenda. Some about sort of getting to know one another. Many of you know each other in other settings, but you don't know each other in this setting. Why is it that you're here? What is it that you've got to contribute to this work? Okay. So again, many of you might get a little impatient with that, but I think it's pretty critical that we lay the groundwork. There's a big chunk of information sharing. You've got a big fat notebook, and I've asked Ed and Fran to really spend some time walking through that notebook with you. What is it that you currently have? What's in place now with regard to libraries and parks and rec? And I'm not even sure what else might be in there. And so what do you have now? And then shifting, some lunch will be in Europe somewhere. I'm not quite sure exactly yet. 12:30-ish. And then I want to shift the conversation to, and we'll talk about, if there are questions. I've got a running list of questions. If we do nothing else but identify all the questions you need to get answered, that will be a productive time in my mind for you all. But this discussion really is, what are the opportunities that you have? What is it that you can add value with this authority that you couldn't do before? So I really do want to spend some time helping you all think about that question. What do you have? What are the advantages that you can leverage? And what are some of the actions and decisions that you need to make in order to do that? Probably throughout this discussion, there are going to be some activities and decisions that might come out of this conversation, but also just are going to pop up. And you'll have to you'll get to some of that. I've put a timeline up here, and it may not even be long enough. And I thought we could map to some of those things, not just sort of how we got started on this end, but what are the major milestones that you'll need that I might say we, I mean you, really. But I mean it with you today. So what are the things that you're going to need to be paying attention to as the year evolves, or even as the authority evolves? Which brought me a little bit to a conversation I was having with Matt in preparation to this. So the reason I put this out here is not because I have them on my shelves, but I do. This is really something that's written 20 questions nonprofits ask about working with local government. So it's not quite the same focus, but when we put this together years ago, it was really about some basics of that nuts and bolts about working with local government, because what we found in our research with nonprofits anyway was that there was not an awful lot of information about how to access this. Now that was 15 years ago, and I hope things have stepped up a bit and that there's more information and more knowledge. But it's just sort of a basic primer on how local governments do business, how you access them, things like when, what their budget process, when do they start getting busy. So it's not like you can come to the public hearing in May or June when they adopt the budget and say, well, wait, I didn't get my stuff in. It's a process that kicks in early in the year, and they're probably well underway by February. I don't know the specifics about your county, but so there's also just some nuts and bolts about who does what in terms of cities and counties. I think that's in the middle table. I would suspect that there's a lot of knowledge in this room about how that works. In the general public, I'll tell you, they don't know. Most folks have no idea who does what, and they don't really care who does what. So for cities and counties, I think this is really important that you pay attention to this, because if you're not thinking about how your other local government's actions reflect on you and vice versa, then you're not thinking like the regular citizen, which is, it's just all government to me. But for those that are curious, this is sort of a breakdown of kind of what cities do and what counties do, what they both might do, what's one exclusive, what's exclusive to the other. So I just brought a couple of these as I thought they might be useful background. And I didn't bring too many. Maybe I should have. I figured you county folks should know this. If you don't now, you will. So that's what that is, just some background information. So first of all, I didn't finish. So expectations of service. This is a discussion that, quite frankly, when I got to blocking out the times, I was a little bit concerned that we might not have all the time that we need. And this really is, I think, an opportunity for, since you've got 3 of your members from the county commissioner, you know, having a conversation that what does the Board of County Commissioners expect from this authority? What does the authority expect from the Board of County Commissioners? And then really, what are the expectations that you have of each other in terms of survey? I think this is an important conversation, and I'm happy to figure out if there's another time block that you want to use to make sure this happens. But right now, I'm kind of putting it on tentatively as if we get to it, I'd love to. But I think that the others are pretty critical, but I'm open to your ideas about whether there's something else that you think we shouldn't do, but you'd rather do this.
Sounds great.
Is there anything else that you thought we'd talk about that's not really kind of reflected here? A big chunk of stuff?
I think one of the things that, you know, we want to make sure you get information so that you can be knowing what questions to ask. You already know, all of you have been on boards before, we know that. But we want to get you the information where we are. I think that's the big thing. And then start thinking about how we're going to set up our own rules and regulations. There was a library board, there was a Parks and Rec board, there's a Greenway board, there's a Farmland Preservation board. There are many, many boards that kind of do parts of what we're going to be doing. And so, you know, I would like, if it's all right, anytime someone has a question right then to ask it instead of hold it, because I think more, not impromptu, but just as you go.
I agree. If it's a clarifying question, yes. If it's something that's going to require a decision and it's something we plan to talk about, we may delay.
Yes.
But I agree, and that's kind of why I just wrote up questions, and everybody's free to grab a pen and put it up there if you want.
Just a point of information, and I don't want it to affect anything going on here today. My wife is going to Israel, and I have to take her to the airport. So I didn't want to miss that. She's going to be gone for 12 days, maybe 38 years, so I'm going to be a wreck about that. I need to leave at 11:30, so if you just, if lunch, you want to consider lunch at 12 instead of, me coming back and then it being lunchtime.
So you'll be
might
back?
Better use of everybody's time.
So when will you be gone?
Be gone from 11:30 until about 12:30, 12:45.
Okay. That was sort of hope, I was thinking we would be right around this information sharing piece on that, but by virtue of your position, you may actually have more information available to you than some others.
I don't want it to affect anything because the chairman can bring me up to speed on anything. So.
Okay. Is it possible to make sure we get lunch at 11:30? That might actually help us.
I checked. Right now, they're scheduled to deliver at 12.
Okay. If possible, that leaves us all kinds of options. Thank you for sharing that. Ellen, you have one?
The expectations of service, it's somewhat preliminary level roll into getting to know one another.
I think there will be some of that in here, but I don't think we have this expectation until we have this conversation, some of this and some of this. So that's why I think it's last. Just kind of a heads up. We'll see. We might move faster than we want. Okay. So, what am I doing with this? I want to just offer these discussion guidelines, and they are the same that I offered to the Board of Commissioners last week. They are actually in your handout, and I don't want to go through them verbatim, but I did want to kind of highlight a couple of important ones, especially as a brand new group. So there's kind of three, for groups to be effective, your personal needs need to be met, the group needs need to be met, and you have to want to continue to work together. Part of wanting to continue to work together, because you probably all been part of groups where you got to be there for whatever reason, and the work's getting done, but it's there, and you don't enjoy being there, and that's no fun, okay? So the group needs to want to continue to work together, and one of the things that I think is important is having some kind of discussion guidelines to help you put good information in the room. And I've just found time and time again that these are really helpful. So I thought I would suggest some. I'd like to ask if you're willing to practice them, and I'd like to help practice them with you during the day. So a couple of pretty basic ones. Being specific. I think it was last week I gave the example of, we need to clean the garage out. And who's we? Is that me, we? Is that you, we? Or is that us together, we? We need to do such and such. Just generalities is just not as helpful as being very specific when you talk about something, which is tied to this sharing your reasoning. I'd like to hear your point of view, and I'm sure others need to hear your point of view. Advocate what you want to talk about. Ask people what their point of view is, but in the middle of that, share your reasoning. So I really favor this particular course of action because it does this, this, and this, which I'm really interested in seeing happen. Mac, what do you think? So I might just really turn it around because that would then say, I'm actually really curious. I spent a lot of years thinking that if I just talk longer, louder, and hard enough, you'd come around to my point of view. But it doesn't really work. It's not very effective in the least. To hammer somebody over the head, it's better to put the information in the room. There's more likelihood that you'll find areas where you may agree or disagree. Just don't even know. So then, focusing on interests and not positions, I think that's really going to be critical in these discussions. My understanding is probably everybody's got something they love to do, and there's a reason why they're involved in this particular work. But if I was all about my particular park, for instance, and not focusing on the interests of opportunities for folks to have outdoor recreation or whatever it is, the conversation last week was around, for instance, the desire to have recreational facilities within 5 minutes of everybody in the county, for instance. That is so that we have access to outdoor recreation or different kinds of activities. And that's not, I think we should put the park here, for instance. So to the extent that it's possible, thinking about what is it that you'd like to have happen. And I might ask you, why is that? Why do you say that? What do you, and so I get a little annoyed perhaps, but it's because I'm trying to kind of peel back that notion to what is it that you actually want to have happen. The other one that we're going to have to practice, I think, pretty early on is this defining what important words mean. So I put these little quotes up here because I hear them a lot. And so be thinking about this, because in this context, culture and recreation, for instance, what do those things mean? Let's surface what those things mean to you all, because I could use that word and it may not have the same meaning for Joe. I told them last week my favorite, elected officials is fiscally responsible. Everybody wants to be fiscally responsible, but yet that means something different to a whole 5-member, 6-member, whatever board. It's going to mean something different. Working closely, collaboration, those are words that are kind of like those. We think we know what they mean, but really don't. And I think they're really, really important to check out. Which leads me to this checking on your assumptions. I can't remember now, there was a good example last week of somebody talked about an example, an assumption that they make, and you just go off because you think that's the way it's been, and that's the way it's been before, so of course that's what he meant. And without the ability to go, wait, let's make sure that I actually do know what we're talking about before we go off. So I've run through these quickly, and there may be others that you have that you use. And I'm going to help you practice some of these, and I'm going to try and model these. But I would really stress the importance of having some kind of discussion guidelines for your group as you go on, because you're having to make, this is sort of precedent setting. It's new territory. So if you all don't have an understanding of what you're going to be striving towards, others will not get it. And when, 15 years from now, people go, man, how did they do that in Buncombe County? And they come interview you. You'll be able to explain to others, well, here's what's the foundation that we laid. So these discussion guidelines are not always easy. I pick on this, I tell this story often, I pick on my mother, and I've told her I pick on her. I had a house that I was trying to sell in eastern North Carolina, and it was right downtown, and so it's very, very visible. I knew I was going to have to spruce it up and kind of make it look a little bit better, and I knew I was going to have to do all the work myself, so I was trying to find just something I could do to give greater curb appeal. So I thought, I'll put some mulch in the front flower bed because the flowers aren't looking so good. At least it'll look better. It's on Main Street. People will see it, notice it, and talk about it. Because that's what they do in small towns in Eastern North Carolina. So I went to Lowe's on a Sunday afternoon. My mom happened to be visiting, and I said, I'm going to go buy some mulch. And so she says, well, just whatever you do, don't buy cypress mulch. And she walks on into Lowe's, and I don't know. I don't ask. And so I looked, and I thought, well, it's probably money. My mother's known for being very, very tight and thrifty, and so I thought, that's probably what her issue is. But I go in and look at the mulch. I look at the pine bark mulch, which is of those funky colors, and it's kind of like nugget shaped, and it's kind of bumpy, and this was actually one of those yards where there's a retaining wall, so you'd walk by, and you would see it. I don't like the way that, I don't like those funky, unnatural looking colors, so I looked at the cypress mulch, and it's a really beautiful color brown, and it looked lightweight. I was going to have to spread it myself, so I knew that I could actually get the work done. It would lay flat. I just thought I priced it different. It's like $6 different to get the 10 bags of cypress mulch. So I loaded those 10, so I thought that's worth it. I'll get the $6 of satisfaction. Load those 10 bags of cypress mulch, start rolling my cart through the middle of Lowe's, and Mom comes out of the marked down plant aisle, where she's been hanging out, looking for marked down plants. See, because that's what she does. And she starts yelling at me. Why are you buying cypress mulch? I told you not to buy cypress mulch. If you buy cypress mulch, I'm not helping you. And walks away. Really don't know what that's about, but I go with those 10 bags back, and I get my 10 bags of bumpy, lumpy pine bark mulch, and we check out and we go home. And finally, I thought, we're going to have to ask her, Mom, what was that about? Because you yelled at me in the middle of Lowe's on a Sunday afternoon in a small town in Eastern North Carolina, and I'm really embarrassed, and I don't understand. She said, well, I saw this special on PBS about how they're cutting down all of the cypress trees in the swamps of Louisiana. I think it's a degradation to the environment. It's not a sustainable practice. People aren't talking about it, so I'm telling everybody as often as I can. Oh, now that I understand what you're interested in, instead of what your position is, I understand what you mean, and I actually agree with you. There's no way in hell I would have bought cypress mulch had I understood what you're interested in. But here's the kicker to the story. I've probably told that for 3 years. It's so much easier if Mom had just explained to me what her interests were instead of her position. I would have been fine. But what did I forget to do?
Ask her.
Huh.
You forgot it was your mom.
No, I didn't forget. That's why I just said yes, Mom, without asking. But I did not check my assumptions at all. If I had checked my assumptions with her, tell me, why? What? Because I assume it's about money. Oh, no, it's not about money. It's about all these other things that you love and care about as well. So my major point is that it's so much easier to see how we don't do things the way, how others shouldn't do it. You know, you shouldn't do that, George. George was wrong in his communication patterns. Instead of, wow, what could I do differently? Which is the only thing I have control over, is my own attitude. So, it's a silly story perhaps, but I hope that to me, it was just like, it hits all of these things. And it's not just about what I didn't do or what she didn't do, it's about what we could have done together to create greater understanding in the room. So, I encourage you all to think about practicing those discussion guidelines. Would that be an okay thing for today?
Yep.
Yeah. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. All right. So the timeline, everybody is welcome to add to that. Everybody is welcome to add to the questions. I think I'm going to put this up too.
Can we put that up for you?
It'd be great. I'm not sure we're going to get that up.
Somewhere.
Here, just in case. So, I know that you all know each other, but I'd like for you to introduce yourselves, and I'd like to ask you to answer these two questions, which I meant to write down and I didn't. What is it that you have to give to service on this authority board? And what is it that you hope to gain out of serving on this board? Because there's probably some personal motivation that has brought you here. There may be lots of, I don't know what it is, but there's probably something in particular that made you the person that's the best fit for this board right now. So what is it that you have to give to service on this authority board, and what is it that you hope to gain out of serving on this board?
Start anywhere?
I don't care, we could do it popcorn style. That's
Okay.
fine.
Of course, what I hope to gain. Personally, I have concern for the children in the county. We have drug problems, we have poverty, we have so many things that affect these children. And I think if you can, the earlier you can get them, the earlier you can expose them to positive activities that engage their mind and their body and their time, then, long term, that'll be a help to some of these heartbreaking issues that we continue to see. So for me, I have a 7-year-old grandson. They say that's life change. It is, isn't it? It is life change. And for me, as I reflect back on the times I spent with kids and things with kids, pretty little, it's not, it seems to be more important. I seem to be looking back so that I can look ahead through his eyes. And so, as I travel all over this county, I see some places where we're not taking care of the children to the extent that I believe we could as a community, as authority, as boards, and as churches and schools. So, and I think it's not going out there and spending $150,000 on 7 month cards and, all of a sudden I don't have to think about children no more. It's bigger than that. Interactive, cognitive learning, places where they can really have fun. Some of it by themselves, some of it with their parents. The concern for children. That's
What do you hope to gain by service on this board, this authority?
to be able to look back in a few years and see that as this board and as board of commissioners that we've made a difference in children's lives. You can look and see parents with their children engaging in little small parks and, church playgrounds or throughout the community that we've sent that type of signal. There's a lot of big team activity, big events, but, the smaller one-on-one engaging things that kids need with their parents and being able to provide a way to do those.
Okay. It's Matthew, but I have Mac.
Yeah, you can call me Mac.
It's Matt. Sorry, that's what somebody told me. It was M-A-C-T. Matt.
What I'd like to gain is I'd like to basically improve the overall health of the citizens of Buncombe County. It's a line gap that I've cast here. Childhood obesity, adult obesity, getting people outdoors, finding facilities to have them be able to be financed from some sort of place they can relieve stress and do an activity they enjoy, themselves or their children. I also like to improve the economic health of Buncombe County. I think that parks and greenways and cultural facilities and libraries are very connected to recruiting the right kind of jobs, good paying jobs for the area. So those are the two, I guess it's solid and undeveloped, but there's one facets that I'd like to see happen. As far as what I have to give, I have a lot of knowledge of 15 years of greenways and parks, serving on boards, I've served on. But I also have been in a small business owner, and I deal a lot with budgets and logistics and facilities management and dealing with people in all different situations. So I feel like I have a lot to deal with that.
Thank you. What else? Ellen?
What I'd like to give is advocacy for the library.
I'm sorry.
Advocacy for the library because the library will now be sharing limited funds. And I'd like to use my knowledge of the way library systems function. But I would also like to give my support for recreation, grandchildren, beneficiaries of Buncombe County's recreation system.
What would you like to gain in your
And I
service?
would, for gain, I would like to see this organization able to look way down the road and say, where are we going? And how are we going to get there? And what will be the measures of what we've achieved as we work toward what our goals we're set?
Thank you. David?
I think I can give some experience with starting a new entity. I had the pleasure of being chairman of the Mountain Resource Commission that was created by the General Assembly. We represented 25 counties and by a very diverse group, and I was privileged to be able to help get that started and going. And I think all three of the current commissioners have, of course, insight of what the commission's doing, so we can be liaisons, and that's kind of why we chose the three of us to do this. As far as gaining, I would like for the employees, existing employees, to gain the confidence that they would be treated fairly and properly in every sense of the word, and also to make both the library and Parks, Recs, and Greenway much better than they already are, which is a pretty high functioning level. So I would just like to improve an already good, two good organizations.
To add on to what David said, we know libraries and parks and rec can be the first thing to go, because some people view that as frivolous or not necessary. And to me, they're life-sustaining. And in our county, if we have thriving parks and recreation, we're gonna make this county better. Far, far better. And if we talk about whether there's a park 5 minutes away from someone's house or economic development, as Matt said, we don't want to be a place like Detroit when everything's crumbling around us. We want to become a national model for this. And Buncombe County has been a home for national models in the past. And I think what I have to give, I know a little enough about libraries to be dangerous. I know a little bit about arboretum to be a little dangerous. But I know that it makes everybody feel better. And I know what I can give is, I'm a big thinker and a big dreamer and somebody with a lot of vision. And what I'd like to gain from it is more knowledge of what everybody brings to the table. And I also want to echo David's sentiments that the employees have done an incredible job and they deserve to have everything the same, if not better. And I think what we're doing here is going to make our model extraordinary. To me, it's not a compromise for limited funds. We're going to be able to reach into a big expanse and make things better.
And reach into the big what?
Make things better, stronger, for brands. And my model for a board would be MSP. I think the Metropolitan Board, what is great about that board is everybody leaves their agendas, politics at the door, and functions at a high level. The employees are extraordinary, the management is extraordinary, they never miss a beat. And the meetings of all the boards I'm on, sounds crazy, my favorite board to go to because it's just so directed, so positive to do a good job.
Karen?
I like what you suggested about all of our individual answers to what is culture, what is recreation. So I immediately started spinning down the list.
And actually, I'm gonna get to that.
Well,
Yeah.
what I came up with is, was the game part of this. For me, the intersection between culture and recreation, which are a signature of the community, are wellness, enlightenment, and community. And they both go hand in hand because I feel that it raises the individuals in our community and the whole of our community across a whole lot of disciplines and opportunities. I'm very excited about that. I share with Matt the belief that this is a strong economic development tool for our community. I think when companies come here and look at moving here, they're looking for a quality of life and what contributions we're all making for those with deliberation. And I think for those people who live, work, and play here, I think it's part of business retention and part of quality of life. So I'm very interested in that. I have a whole list of things, but they'll all flesh out over time. What I can give is I've got a myriad of experience in community building. Also, we run a small business for 17, 18 years. So the fiscal responsibility, however you define it, is very, very important to me. Fairness is very important to me. And I guess the last couple of thoughts I would really like the world of game to understand what our citizens' priorities are. And I would like to listen and provide access to the people of our community and work with them to devise a long-term vision and plan to enhance these assets. Lastly, I would say that I lost my dad many years ago, and he was a great man. He was also a builder. Actually ran for the county commissioners one time in Virginia, but he lost. But he told me back in the 80s when I was working on downtown revitalization, I'm particularly harried, and I'm like, why is all this stuff happening? Why is all this stuff happening in my personal life, business, community, and blah, blah, blah. And how am I going to decide which things are most important? And he said, honey, you should always focus on what lasts for 3 generations. That's children, that's trees, that's spirit. So I see this CRA as having a wonderful opportunity to steward those things that can most improve our community for 3 generations.
Did you have anything else to add to this?
For me? Yeah.
My background's landscape architecture, and I'm the director of the Arboretum here. And I think people frequently think of landscape architecture as being plants and trees and shrubs and that sort of thing. But when I think of it as, and the thing I've taken from my training has been most valuable is the process of design. How to go through a decision-making process to come out at the end with proper identification of objectives and proper understanding of trade-offs, and really building an end product that meets those criteria. And so I think from my perspective, I hope that's what I can bring to the table to help this process. Because I think what's at play in this, it seems to me, is bringing really synergistic but disparate parts together into a whole that can impact people's lives in a very direct way. You know, I'm a grandparent also, Joe, and so I think of it in terms of my grandchildren, my family, and future generations. We've been thinking about that in the Arboretum for a long time. How do we make the Arboretum not just a place, but an influence on the region? And so when I think about this opportunity, what I hope to contribute is sort of a landscape architectural perspective from that process point of view. What I hope to gain from it is really further professional growth and understanding how to take these things I've had the opportunity to be involved in and apply them to a community scale activity that's similar in scale to what the Arboretum's been about, but yet different in terms of public engagement, public involvement, and public accountability. I also have to bring an understanding of government. We're part of the university system, so I've had that training. I've been involved in the conservancy downtown, so I've got some exposure to city and county government complexities involved in that, and as well as sort of the fiscal accountability side of life in terms of audits and those kinds of things. So hopefully those sorts of experiences will help me continue learning the roads involved in this.
I want to add something too, just so that the group would know, and the commissioners notice, that one of the things that I would give to this organization, I think you mentioned before, you mentioned the vision. Now everybody's mentioned that. Where I was raised in southern West Virginia, McDowell County, I go back there now. I do not want areas of this county to look like where I'm from. And
For those of us that aren't familiar, what is
okay,
that?
well,
What does that mean?
it's southern Appalachia. You know, if you saw, I mean, there was a few years ago, there was an NBC portal in McDowell County, and where the jobs went away, different things went away, the families breaking down, the economic part of it. But if you go back and really look at it, you'll see that Lincoln Park that was there is not being used. You'll see that the outside recreation areas dried up. You'll see that people retreated into their homes for some reason. And I don't know, it was back when television is. I don't know what occurred. Something occurred. People retreated from the outside to the inside. And then, and I want to give them a reason we live in those people. I mean, I get up in the morning, I look out and I pinch myself. It's gorgeous around here. But if you do not take care of the children, give them a place, and, you know, it will end up looking like pockets of Detroit. And in Detroit, it didn't end up the way it is. And in one day, you create this pocket, you know, of problems, you know, and we need to avoid that in the county. So every time I think about whatever we're doing for children, every time I think about, you know, whether it be parks, whether it be the libraries, whatever it is, I pour it through that filter. And to avoid any area of this county deteriorating to that point. And it can happen. It can happen 2 generations from now if we're not good stewards of these assets.
Well, and to add on to that, it should be that people always feel safe and comfortable to be able to go to their library. They should feel safe and comfortable to go to their neighborhood park. And we should encourage them for what we provide.
So what do you notice about this list? I mean, what we have on here is concern, engagement. I think that actually ties back to what you're talking about. What you don't want to see is withdrawal. What you want to see is engagement. There's lots of experience with specific aspects of technical pieces that folks are going to be dealing with here. The whole notion about facilities management, people management, some knowledge about the systems here for both Parks and Recreation as well as libraries. Some experience starting a new group, so that's always helpful. Insight into the BOCC Board of County Commissioners. So there's my show of hands for you today. And not only insight into what that board is thinking, but also advocacy for these activities within that Board of County Commissioners. So good experience with regard to community building, the whole notion of fiscal conservancy, I guess, is fiscal responsibility, how it extra confidence and stewardship. This is so interesting, George, we talk about sort of this process, that this is tremendously helpful, I would think, in what you've got work for this authority going forward. And that, again, this notion of engagement, overall health, being outdoors, creating a strong economic health, making this a place that's very attractive to be. I was in the elevator, waiting in the elevator with a group from all over the country. They're rural health advocates that are downtown. And they're having a blast, gotta tell you. And they're here for a reason, right? Not just to meet. They're contributing to the long-term vision, making sure that folks that are employed now are confident that they'll be treated fairly, raising the bar really for both of the organizations that are involved. Looking to increase support through grants. I love the way you put this, Karen, this wellness, the intersection of where all these things are. Wellness, enlightenment, and community. And that's community engagement. This is very directly tied to what Joe was talking about as well. And this notion about you'd like to gain through work on this board or authority an understanding of the citizens' priorities, not only how they access, but also what their long-term plans are. So that's what I've heard. That's a lot. It is good stuff. Is there anything that you think you may be missing in this perspective so far? We've got a lot of good stuff here in this 7-member board, but there may be other things that aren't really showing up that you need to seek out intentionally for whatever reason.
One thing I think of is that there may be other models out there, although this is probably pretty unique. I think that there have been other cities, and Denver is one that comes to mind, where I think they've had sort of a cultural fund that tries to support at least the cultural side of this approach. So there may be some other models out there that we might want to look for and observe.
Okay. And I don't know if you all have some information about that when we get to that, but let's just make sure we don't lose that question.
Lydia, can I add to what George is saying? Perhaps we can do this with Angie. You know, if we discover models, given what we work on professionally or civically or national networks, or books or literature, I'd love to have a place where we could post that or share that or let them know how to, I think that's right, to do that. Okay. And the conferences.
And this is gonna happen all day long, I bet. Oh, and this, and this, and this, and this.
And
Sorry.
like to say,
No,
I
that's
would
good,
like-
that's what today's for.
I would like us to have a sheet to add to our notebook about everybody's address, email, so that when we get that, we can just link it and send it out in the short run, but also that somebody can keep it and put it in place, a repository like you're talking, so kind of both ways. And I think we have that now, but just make sure we have all the information that we can set up a group on our own email and shoot one of
One
out.
has step too, on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's where I have to acknowledge that we've had this conversation here, but there are other folks in the room. And they may have something really valuable to give and gain out of this too. Shall we spend a few minutes asking who's in the room and what they have to add to? Back here.
Shall I go first?
Yeah,
All right, I'm Ed Shearing. I'm the library director and the interim authority director. I've been the library director for almost 24 years. I started work at Pack Memorial Library as a bookshelfer in 1968. So I spent most of my life with this library. For 15 years, I wandered the wilderness, primarily in eastern North Carolina, before I got the opportunity to come back here in 1990. I think I'm here in part because I was drafted. Thank you, Wanda. But primarily, this is exciting. And I think what's exciting about this is we are already in the midst of at least the administrative merger of the public library and the recreation department. And the opportunity to work with Fran, who I've known most of my life, we actually grew up together, has been just a remarkably fulfilling experience. So I'm very, very positive about that. I think one of the other things right now that I feel I bring to this is there are some precedents out there in library world that are reasonably similar to this. In North Carolina, particularly in rural parts of the state, there are multi-county regional libraries. There's two to the west, actually three around us. There's one out of Burnsville, there's one out of Bryson City, and another one that operates out of Murphy, that are three-county regional libraries. They operate as public authorities, so their structure and their legal and financial accountability requirements are pretty similar to what we are looking at here. Early in my career, my first directorship was the Northwestern Regional Library out of Elton. So 30 years ago, I knew a little bit about this. Now, not so much. Got a lot of catching up to do. But that's who I am, and what I'm bringing to this right now, I think, is really this sense of adventure. There's in South Carolina, for example, I've been envious for years that the larger public libraries, Greenville, Spartanburg, Columbia, have a millage, which in effect is a dedicated library tax. Now they have to, similar to what the authority will do, go to their county commissioners to get that millage set. But again, there's some precedent for that. And those libraries typically are much better funded than we've been. So I'm optimistic in that sense.
I'm Martin Green, I'm the county manager, and by virtue of the legislation and the fact that we are consolidating and bringing under Ed and Fran's leadership the these functions together as a county department this year. And ongoing, we have a responsibility, but as you identify things you want to do from a capital perspective, I just wanted to be here and hear the connect as we go through the process so that I know what's going on both sides.
Good morning, I'm Fran Thigpen. I've worked for the county for quite a few years with children and parks and recreation. Had an opportunity to work with some of y'all on other boards. Good to see you again. I think I plan to give you as much energy as I possibly can. I'll bring you the best possible things I can put on the table for you. I give you my promise that what we've done so far working with Ed has been really, really positive because of staff. That we are bringing a model from the county manager to put together libraries and recreation that has been exciting since July. And I can tell you that I give you also some of the best staff to work with and some of the best energy that they have, and they've made this a really wonderful experience. I hope to gain for us better opportunities for the community at all ages in the areas of increased physical activity, increased access to healthy food options, and increased opportunities to libraries.
I'm Angie Hall. I've worked for Buncombe County for about 16 years, and 13 of those under Fran Thigpen. I do accounting work for our department, work with the budget in the past. I've been asked to serve as your clerk to the board, so this is a brand new role for me, and I look forward to the journey that this CRA brings.
I'm Gigi Francis. I'm the administrative librarian for the Buncombe County Library System. I've worked for Buncombe County in the libraries in different capacities since 1988. I've worked with Ed since 1990. In administration, I think I'm going to bring the knowledge of what the library is and what the library does, so we can figure out how to fit together better with parks. And really, this is just something totally new. It's going to be exciting, and we're going to make it work. So I want to see how that's going to happen.
I'm Scarlett Clark, and I'm going to be the finance part of the two. Mine's just trying to take care of the money and keep it flowing. It's been exciting for me because I've always been in the finance world for 20 years, and now I'm getting to see the library side, the rec side, and it's so exciting to see other parts that you're not, that are involved with the county other than just the finance part, you know? So Ed and Fran and all the staff has been excellent to me, so I'm excited to be here.
I'm Sally Warren. I've been with the county for 21 years. Coming over here in 95, working in administration with Ed and Gigi for all these years. And I'm an administrative technician. In other words, I take care of the accounting part of the libraries, paying the bills and everything, taking care of all the deposits. I'm going to be the backup clerk to Angie.
And we have two other folks in the room, not to answer this question, but three other folks, I'm sorry. You're so behind the camera.
Thank you very much. I think I've been around for 26 years in Buncombe County all my life, actually 62 years. Buncombe County has done a great job on libraries. Parks, I think they've done somewhat, I'd call a good job. Not the best that I'd expect, but I think hope to see a vision that the city folks could have a part in this because they're not at the table and they have the most of the population, and I think we need to focus on that issue. I think one thing that hasn't been said, I've heard it in broad terms of health and safety, but I think a concern that I would be a lightning rod about is the environmental issues that you're going to deal with when you're dealing with greenways and parks. And why I'm saying that is because of the environmental issues of the land that's purchased to do these kinds of jobs are a lot of times land that nobody wants to touch or bother. And I think that it's going to be a financial hole that we could get into. So I'd hope that the board can see the vision that we might have a lot of money right now, and we're going to get some more money, but in the future, it could be a bad situation if we don't look at the environmental issues that surrounds what we're doing.
Thank you for your presence today.
Thank you.
I might want to just see what I'm just taking notes.
Okay. Because you care about.
Bang for the buck.
I'm Mark Barrett. I'm a reporter with the Asheville Citizen-Times. I hope to gain an understanding of what you guys are doing, and I'll give you a story about it in tomorrow's paper. Any present you want to accept or not.
Thank you. So, is there, you've got now added to the board's Gain and Give, you've got a lot of experience either in Parks and Recreation or library, a lot of knowledge around, some knowledge about what other things might be similar. Certainly a capital perspective. I got a couple of checks on the accounting and financial piece, what library does, taking care of finances. So there's some good technical knowledge in the room here as well. And this notion about it's kind of fun to kind of get out of your, I'm going to put you in an accounting hole, sorry. Because to me that's what it feels like. But it's kind of fun to come out and see what else there is going on in county government and be a part of what was, I think, appropriately called a new adventure. And so looking at being able to actually kind of be exposed to new other areas is an exciting thing for folks in the back of the room. So is there anything else that you can, that as you look at this and you think about this, that you, wow, I wish we had blank to add to this mix? And it may not be obvious, and if I just want to pose the question because throughout the day, this is again our opportunity to kind of make notes either on our timeline or on our questions or something else to say, we really need to be thinking about this side of it as well. So keep that in mind. I don't particularly see anything that's conflicting in terms of what folks have to give or gain out of this, but there may be more nuances than I'm aware of.
I wanted to really echo what Fran said, and it could be our mission. She said it very simply when she said better opportunities for the community. And to me, that's why we're all here. I mean, it's so many layers of that, but that's why we're all here.
Yeah, actually, I have a better opportunity and access for community members. So that actually leads kind of right into the next question, which I kind of want to put on the table. Is there, what, in addition to the specific things that you bring, what motivated you to apply in the first place and to be serving on this? Was it this better opportunity than access? Anything else in addition to it?
I find the whole idea of this so exciting to take the things that are not just health and safety and fire protection and so on, and concentrate on them. Think about them really thoroughly and how we can enhance this part of our community life. Because to me, this doesn't sound right, but it's the icing on the cake of a community. So I'm hoping that we can just make the most of this. One concern is how do we bring the Black community into participation in all of this, in libraries, in recreation, in leadership, in what the community wants in terms of libraries and recreation. And I hope we won't forget that at any point in what we're talking about.
So that's a concern that I'm going to list up here in terms of have you tapped the viewpoints of all of your residents?
I'm sorry.
How have you making sure that you have tapped the viewpoint of all of your residents?
Yes.
Okay. Any other concerns that this conversation kind of raises for folks?
Well, but I think, when we talk about children, we talk about all the children. We talk about everywhere and everybody. And that is why we cannot get, this tunnel vision of where I live or where you live or what my position is. You gotta be, that is everybody, cannot be anybody. And that's what, as a board, we're challenged to do. As commissioners, we have totally different viewpoints, totally different ideas. We have different districts, but we are charged with everybody in the entire county. Same way with this.
So adding to that geographic breadth.
And I should have mentioned the immigrant community.
Absolutely. That's it.
I think for me, it goes back to everybody needs to feel not only safe, but welcome, and whatever outreach we can do, because although corny, everybody needs to feel like they have a seat at the table. And if you live in Buncombe County, you have the right to walk into wherever you want to go and feel comfortable and safe, and know that they're there.
I love Ellen's word safe, because I think that's going to have to be a key part of all the things we think about. And I agree with Eleanor. It's why I talked about community prioritization and access, and I would like to see this board create a process or whatever for listening, engaging those interests and priorities, and maybe that's part of the, once we get really shored up, that's part of the visioning, or sometimes that word intimidates people, but a community input, I don't know, I'd like to have a kind of system for that. Think about together how we might do that in some kind of structured or organized way.
And I think we're going to have to reach out to these people. Right. The board will represent, we're going to have to reach out to those that we feel very strongly about, and whether it be, certain areas or certain people, certain children. We're going to have to use our influence and our experience in our area. They won't come. They're not going to come. Some few people will come too. But you got to kind of get out there and see. What you need. What you need in the community. What are we looking for?
Well, if you think about it, keeping things simple, and 2 minutes from here at the fountain downtown, in front of the courthouse, all summer long, kids are there. Kids are there playing, and it's the greatest asset. There's no barriers people have to go through. There's not a door they have to go through. It's open. It's right there. People come from all over this county to go right down there. And I think it's a simple thing. It's very simple. It's not complicated. People feel welcome, and they go.
So we could actually, in the discussion that we've got scheduled, we're thinking about that as what is it about that particular place that makes that happen, and how can you replicate that in other areas?
One of the things I'm excited about, and excited and confused at the same time. And don't say anything else, I'm going to wait a lot. Is that this group back here, I have had an opportunity to, when I came on the commission, I was interested in parks, and then it kind of graduated into, how much land do we have? Are we wasting land? If there are little spots out there we can do X, Y, Z. And so Fran, I asked a question, and the next thing I know, I'm in a little meeting, and Fran shows up with all this information, and they start overlaying things, and I promise you, they can execute and show you where the holes are. They have information, they have all of that. We have a vision for certain things. They have that ability to do that. And so, not the confusion part is figuring out how this board does interact with them. Because they're the execution part of this to me. And so, how do we all come together and work with it? Because my first encounter with Fran was amazing. And provided it, and it showed where the need was just pretty quickly, so.
So actually, I was thinking that we would have some time talking about how we define these words, culture and recreation, but maybe that is the segue actually to hearing from staff about what you've got in your notebook, hearing what the current situation is, what have you got to work with, and then let's ask some clarifying questions, particularly with Joe while you're still here. And hear what we've got, and we can get back to this conversation and maybe throughout the day begin to draft our definitions. Does that make sense? I don't know how you want to do this. We had to practice this. So this is a day that's evolving. Everything's evolving. We don't have a precedent, but it's just yet. And again, I think this is the opportunity for us to kind of get clarification, not necessarily to make a decision at this point, but to get clarification about what's out there now.
Just very informally, we're going to work from the notebook. To me, the most fascinating pieces in this are in the back, which are the maps, and we'll just take a quick look through that in a minute and show you those. So don't go look at that. They're too excited. They're going to distract you. In the front of your notebook, what we tried to do here was to put together the basic documents that we think will govern life for at least a little while. The first one you're going to come to is House Bill 418. So this is the bill that was run last legislative session by Representatives Ramsey and Moffitt that creates, in effect, the local bill that authorizes Buncombe County to establish the CRA. If you are a junkie of legislative process, which I am, I love to watch this stuff, this bill went through about 5 revisions. They're on if you Google House Bill 418, it'll take you to the site and you can read each of the revisions. Essentially, as the bill came out, and I'll leave this to Chairman Gant and the other commissioners if they want to elaborate on this, the original intent of the bill was to establish what would be a countywide culture and recreation authority that would enable municipalities to join the county. And that, I think, was the logic behind creating a public authority to do that. That's similar to MSD, which Ellen mentioned a little while ago. That particular legal framework is normally how that's done. As things went on, the bill was changed to the point where references to municipalities were removed. And at this point, my understanding is that without further action by the General Assembly, municipalities are not going to be able to participate in this. But the bill's important because it still contains that framework. So if it's ever changed, if that change does happen, and I would assume this board would be involved in that process of maybe helping to make that happen. The framework is in this bill. So it in effect is our Constitution in many ways.
And if I could say, that's exactly right. The first and second version of this bill specifically reference Buncombe County and the city of Asheville. Interestingly, the third version used the wording Buncombe County and one or more municipalities. The fourth and fifth version had Buncombe County only. And there are references to, they didn't change some of the language in the bills about, because it refers back to the jurisdictional bodies, plural. So, but that's very clearly the General Assembly intended for this to be Buncombe County only. Now, all the municipalities are in Buncombe County. Everybody, whether they live in the city of Asheville or anywhere else, is a Buncombe County resident, pays the same taxes. So, but that's, to go back to emphasize a little bit about the fifth version that passed, fourth and fifth were Buncombe County only, and that's the way we need to operate.
Pursuant to that, on August 6th, the Board of Commissioners adopted the next document we'll come to, which is Ordinance 1308-01. So what the Board of Commissioners did was using the authority granted to them under House Bill 418, they created the Buncombe Culture and Recreation Authority. So you'll notice that the language in the Commissioner's resolution is very much the same language that's in the bill. So it in effect takes the language from the legislature and makes it into what we have here in Buncombe County. So those are I think your two key founding documents, and both of them are quite what I would call permissive in terms of the authorities granted to this board will be the authorities granted to this board by the Board of Commissioners, and that is the way I read it. So that relationship between this board and the Board of Commissioners, I think, is intended to be very close. That's the way I read it.
And would I be correct in saying, because there's not a specific mention of municipalities, but as you said, we're all Buncombe County residents, we're Buncombe County commissioners, so our intent is to represent the whole county, and not the separation of districts, but we're representing the whole county.
Yeah, can I tell that? And this kind of goes to what Jerry and Eleanor said. There is nothing in here, in this bill or in our ordinance, that talks about appointments by districts or, and in fact, I'll just lay it out. District 1 has 0. Nobody on this board lives in District 1. 2 people live in District 2, and 5 live in District 3. I can tell you it was not a huge consideration for our board, even though we are elected by district, except for the chairman. The whole thing is we take care of everybody, wherever they live. Everybody in any of these municipalities, again, lives in the county. And I hope we proceed that way. I know that some of you have had calls from Commissioner Jones about District 1, and we're going to look after District 1. And the fact that none of you live in District 1 does not mean that they don't get represented. You represent them all. And where you live, it matters, but I think as we talk about priorities, it's going to matter a lot less. And I think that's one of the early charges we're going to have is to talk about how do we decide what to do when. And we're not going to do that today. I just put it out there for future thought because it's going to be a big decision we'll make relatively early in the process once we get some of the housekeeping done, I suspect. But you represent everybody, make no bones about that. Wherever you live, we really don't care as much as you're Buncombe County, and we're going to take care of Buncombe County parks, libraries, and residents.
David, does that mean basically that it's a practical matter that the city just doesn't have a role in the authority, but in every other practical way, the city is being treated like any other place in the county?
Yes, good, well put, exactly. Because they have their own parks and rec. I think Black Mountain has their own parks and rec. I don't know about the other municipalities. There's 6 municipalities in Buncombe County. A lot of people notice the one actually, but there are 5 other ones. They have varying degrees of greenways. They have varying degrees of. I don't think anybody else has a library that we do the libraries for everybody. I think I don't want to get into that. But yes, I think you said it exactly right. We will and must take their consideration. They're just not at the table. We're not funding them. And the commissioners, when we set it up, we had 7 cents we could do. We did 3.5 based on the cost of replacing what we're doing. Just kind of revenue neutral between the two. That was the idea. Had we had the other people on there, it would have been closer to 7 cents. Because we'd have to add on for any additional cost that the county was not absorbing because the municipalities were doing it on their own.
I have a parallel question. At some point, and maybe not right now, I would like to, as a board member, understand the relationship between the and responsibilities for the assets covered by the City Parks and Rec Department and this board and the municipalities. You know, it's kind of like, are there boundaries? Do we I'm assuming we participate in all of that as needs and whatever arise? No.
We don't.
But see, I need clarification.
Fran will get, yeah, that's a great question.
Well, and I
Some we do, some we don't, but Yeah.
And I think it's important, you know, for instance, how much does Buncombe County spend every year with Pack Place? Things like that. So I think that's important to know, because Buncombe County, you know, has a significant dollar investment every year with Pack Place. So I think it's important to.
Impact Square.
Pack Square, yeah.
Oh,
And other things.
Yeah. Right. It's
So
all
if I,
integral.
if I capture the relationship to responsibility for assets between Buncombe County and other Buncombe County local governments?
Yeah.
Yes, now.
That's pretty good.
Does that mean, in effect, that in these municipalities, that there are still independent budgets for these types of assets that fall outside of, or in addition to the 3.5 cents?
yes.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example, Lake Louise. We put $0 in Lake Louise, is that right, Fran?
Correct.
The town of Weaverville handles Lake Louise. And we've met with them, we had Joe, the commissioners, we had an informal meeting, talk about it. So there's a lot of loose ends there.
So that's what you're asking, I guess, right, Karen, that we need to know sort of that other side of the equation that's outside of this authority, so we understand the totality of
The
the
boundaries
picture.
and territory here are real important to me, because I kind of don't know where we stop and somebody else starts, or where the overlays are, so I think it's.
I think on the library side, it's very clean. Public libraries in Buncombe County have been funded by Buncombe County government for 30 years. Now, there's still some cooperative relationships we have with Black Mountain, whereas they own the library building and in fact give it to us for our use. We have 2 City of Asheville buildings that we occupy on that same basis. But the operating funding for a generation now has been entirely from Buncombe County. On the recreation side, in essence, what has happened with the creation of the authority is the property that was under the jurisdiction of Fran and her department, Buncombe County Parks and Recreation, is now under the jurisdiction of this board. It does not include parklands that are owned by any of the municipalities. Now, there are some areas of overlap that we'll get into at some point in the future, but it's fairly clear now that if it's a municipal facility, meaning it's in the town of Black Mountain, nothing has changed. That is still a municipal facility. Okay.
I have one question about which I think is tantamount to being able to do our jobs. In the original bill, it states in section 6 that this board can be terminated at any point by the county commission. How can the county commission legally do that when it's a bill that creates it? Even though the word is in there, how does that work?
Well, there'd be 2, well, first of all, we are not a home rule state, so any power the county gets, other than what's in the North Carolina Constitution, has to be given by the General Assembly. We have no authority to tax, we have no authority to do anything other than what they give us. The General Assembly has given us this authority. And even if they didn't, we could do it another way, which is to not fund it. So there are actually two ways we could do a poison pill if that was the will of the majority of the commission. It is clearly not the will. I mean, I think all of us feel good about what's going on here. And that's why we elected. The bill only said you can have, I think the wording is, at least one of the members shall be a member of the governing board of this county. We chose to do 3 because we wanted to be even more involved. It felt like it would be a good way to start off, to make sure that we got off to the right beginnings.
So is that just by majority vote to be terminated? Say in the future you had different politicians?
I think so.
And also to what David was saying, General Assembly tomorrow could say, yeah, we're done with that, you can stop.
Or the other string, they could say, we want to change. I mean, they totally changed how we elect ourselves, our numbers, everything. So the General Assembly can pretty much change anything, anytime. They won't, and they have at this point given us an additional, in addition to the General Assembly's authority, determined that they gave us the authority, which will not be exercised. I mean, we have this is actually quite the opposite. Everyone is pretty bullish on the concept, and they, 6 of the 7 commissioners voted for the budget that set it up this way. And actually, there was 7-0 votes on the formation and making this happen, so actually it's unanimous on our board.
The next document is clearly labeled draft, and it really is a draft. This is a proposed set of rules and procedures for this board. In effect, this would govern how they conduct meetings. One of the key decisions that probably does need to be made at some point today is establishing the regular meeting time. But I encourage you to take this home and study it. It's fairly close in form to the rules used by our own Board of Commissioners, so there's nothing for commissioners that'll be too surprising in there. But that is, again, just a recommendation for this board to consider. All right, the next document, this will be behind tab 3, is the current organization chart. And this really reflects what has happened between Fran's staff and the library staff since July, where we have pulled together into one administrative organization our 2 departments. And that's primarily what this reflects. You'll notice in yellow the Buncombe County Commissioners, then this board, the authority director, and you'll look to below that, the Administrative Services Coordinator. Fran and I are both right now filling dual roles. She's the Administrative Services Director, I'm the Interim Authority Director, she's still the Recreation Director, I'm still the Library Director. So we get confused fairly easily.
You were named tag?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We ought to put a tag on this, whatever role we're playing.
Flip it around.
Yeah, but essentially, that's how we're operating now, and we're operating as co-directors of the department. And at least from my perspective, it's gone okay.
Can I ask a question about this chart? Just because I'm not familiar with this. I see libraries, which is clear. I see recreation, which is clear. But what I don't see is the cultural definition or the articulation in this chart.
Okay, right.
What is the status of that?
Yeah. What we have right now is reflecting the combined departments of recreation and library. The money, and there's some money that exists that is being passed through the authority now that is passed through to some of the cultural organizations in the county. That part of the chart, we're still working on. So it is not developed yet. And hope possibly by the next time you meet, you'll see something more detailed on that. Gigi Francis, who was formerly the number 2 person in the library, will in effect be the head of the library's public service operations.
Can I follow up with what George asked? What are the cultural, and I think that is in the language of the ratified bill, cultural organizations. What other cultural organizations do we support?
There is a list.
And when you say we, you mean the county?
Buncombe County, yes ma'am, Buncombe County Board of Commissioners.
All right, these are what are included outside of library and recreation in the budget now. Pack Place.
Can we make a copy of that?
Yeah, I'll get you a copy of it. Pack Place, there's a payment to the U.S. Cellular Center next door.
Can
Yes.
you, I'm sorry, can you, as you say the name, can you say the dollar amount?
Yeah. In fact, let's just make a copy of that, and we'll save everybody the trouble. Unfortunately, it has a note of mine on the bottom, so do not call that person.
So that's part of what you're doing is building the definition of culture, because that's what you currently fund. These organizations on that list are part of what the county currently supports for culture.
And hence moved over to us in the 3.5 cents, is that right? Okay.
Generally speaking, what percentage of the total budget is libraries, what percentage is recreation, and what percentage is this cultural piece?
Okay, out of the roughly $9.5 million budget, 5 is public libraries. Approximately 2 is parks and recreation. Then you have approximately $1 million, I believe, is what I'm referring to as the pass-through money that has been appropriated by the commissioners to the various cultural organizations. And then there's another couple $100,000 in there that are contingency and existing capital projects. That takes you up to about 9. But
So yeah, this doesn't quite add up, is what you're saying. I'm trying to figure out how to organize this on the chart.
there it is.
Mark?
Now, probably one of the key considerations for this board will be the relationship with, first, I think the Board of Commissioners, as historically, this funding has been allocated by the Board of Commissioners. So how that relationship will work and, in effect, how the commissioners will utilize this board in that decision-making process, I think is something that will have to evolve fairly quickly. That'll be an early priority.
I have another question, which would be a timeline question, actually. Will this board be responsible for working with you all to put together a budget that would recommend an increase or decrease or nothing at all, same as can be by March, say, for the 2014-15 fiscal year budget of the county? So is that a benchmark or a goal for us on the timeline that we need to?
I think the timeline is earlier than that. I believe that was again by the end of February.
End of February.
So you're actually looking for some kind of recommendation from, what are you looking for from this cultural recreation authority?
The actual bill, I think it's in the legislation and it is also in the county ordinance, states that we will submit a budget like other county departments. So the schedule is established by the county manager. So that, and Wanda said, I heard late February. And we haven't received the budget calendar yet.
February or March?
February.
And if I could just go back to, in section 313, specifically prepare and submit an annual budget to the county in the same manner as other county and city departments. Again, that's kind of a carryover from where they didn't change it. But the budget is subject to adoption only by the county. And then 14 is make recommendations and an annual report to the participating units, again, toward that more expansive board concerning the operation and cultural status of the program. So yes, we do make recommendations, and yes, we do report to the Board of Commissioners.
So there are 3 things: the library, park and recreation, and these other organizations that you've got on this, at least those that you've got on this now, but other organizations, cultural organizations in
Plus a
general.
4th recommendations, if there's anything else.
But do we have access to the other budgets that are outside the jurisdiction of this board? that may be funding cultural or recreational facilities in the county, but which lie with municipalities.
That was my next question, because as I look at this list, just looking at it quickly, there's over $1 million that, you know, goes right now to, you know, Pack Place, Civic Center, National Art Museum, you know, right here. So does that money stay in from the general fund of the county, or does it stay within this?
It is very complicated, and I guess, one.
Funding requests from any outside agency are due to us, to the county in November. And we have kind of a hybrid year this year. So and we require audited financial statements, we require performance expectation, or what they promise us they'll do with the money, and we monitor those. And what we would do is any request that came in that fell under a definition of cultural recreation authority, we would pass to the CRA to make recommendations to include it in their budget.
Okay, so we'd be able to see kind of what's existing in their budgets and could augment that if we elect.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and to go a little step further, the county, since I've been on the county commissioner, we have elected to partner with cities. Hall Creek, we went in a third to buy 9 acres. Bowcatcher, we went in $575,000. Waller Track, we went 50-50 to buy 11 acres. Pack Place, that's all part of the, really it's all a carryover from the water agreement that was dissolved. A lot of history. The 30-second version is about, 30 years ago, city and county came together and decided to share assets, and the county would pay for things, and we had the water authority, and kind of ancient history, but maybe 6 years ago? How long ago did they dissolve it?
Pack Place?
The water agreement.
Oh, the water agreement. Wow.
I can't.
It's been 6 years.
So when it was dissolved, the assets that the county was paying for, such as McCormick Field, went back to the city. Some things we kind of kept.
Right.
The way it was, Pack Place, Pack Square in particular was a big one. So we'll get into the history, but there's a lot of history of partnerships, divorces, kind of helping, courtships, separate.
Can our vision override all that as an authority?
I think we can. I think we can. We are limited what the authority of the General Assembly, and that's why I wanted this to be, and I'm glad they put this as the very first document, because this is our authority.
Right.
And we cannot exceed this authority. I think there's some things we can do, and we'll flesh them out over time. Great questions. You're getting right to the heart of some of the issues about why there were 5 drafts, what we can do and not do. I think initially there was a feeling the municipalities could have the county pay for it, and they would be relieved of the burden, because it's kind of for county people anyway. But again, the General Assembly did not give us that authority, so we've got to. I'm going to really focus us back to this a lot, because there's some things that maybe we'd like to do that we did not have the authority to do, because the General Assembly does have the big stick and they can cut us down.
But so back to this $1 million that's being spent right now, right here, right now, that money will still come out of the CRA, that tax?
From a county perspective, we would give it to those requests to CRA to make a determination what they want to fund. Doesn't have to be the $1 million. You may choose to fund more, but that recommendation needs to come from this board to the Board of County Commissioners. Yes, ma'am.
Yesterday, and I don't know if the rest of you were experiencing this, but I'm actually getting some phone calls from people out in the community asking questions, much of which I said, give me past tomorrow, because I don't know all those answers. Yesterday, I got a telephone call from a person on this sheet. And their concern was, what is the status of the CRA? Are you operating right now? Do you have the money, or does the county have the money? And where's our check coming from? Or is it still even coming? Or is this new CRA board going to turn over all of this stuff? I'm like, I'll be back to that. So here we are.
Answer to that. Right, this year we're operating as a county department. Whatever the Board of Commissioners approved in the budget, we are making those checks. We also require performance reports back in from any outside agency we fund, but the check will come this year from Buncombe County.
So is there a point, Chairman Dance and Wanda, that all of this will officially transfer, including a bank account, to a CRA entity, or will the county still hold that? One of the questions I got yesterday is there a transition date, like January 1 or July 1, that the CRA will have a fund on its own, be in charge of employees on its own, be fully effective? Is there a date out there? And my thought is,
The discussion that we've had is that we continue to provide those support services to you so that you can keep employees on the benefit packages they're used to. It's very expensive to transition to a small organization and have those things. So we've had discussions from our perspective that we continue to provide those services, and you reimburse the county with your funds.
So,
There's no deadline to transition, that answer your question.
that's good. And that's
So
just,
we're
we're
just
fully
recommendations.
operable right now.
There's
That's what I-
there's a fiscal issue, I think, it's essentially what is happening this year. And this probably won't change much in future years as long as we're about the size we are now. The county tax collector is collecting the 3.5 cents.
Right.
Tax bills are due in January. Most people pay relatively late, December, early January. The county right now, in effect, is bankrolling the CRA. When the taxes come due in January, in effect, the county will reimburse itself for those expenses from the tax collector for the CRA. So the fiscal account, in effect, the first full year of any sort of separate financial existence would be July, which would be the beginning of the next fiscal year. But I think, as Wanda was saying, we're anticipating the relationship is going to be very close, and that the county will be the CRA service provider. So in effect, we'll reimburse the county for the expenses we incur. Right now, if a check is written to Pack Place, for example, as part of their agreement with the county, that is being charged against the CRA's account, and that would be part of the reimbursement. Is that the way you understand it?
That's exactly the way I understand.
So in essence, right now, we're using the county as a bank because we don't have any money.
And it's the same for the employees, and that's a policy decision that we will have to make as a CRA board, is how we do that. I think there's been discussion about leasing, just keeping the employees under the county until we get all of our vision and all our procedures down, and maybe beyond that, but at least in the short run, let's keep things as much as we can the way it is. Let's set our priorities, let's get our act together as we meet and discuss and get to know each other, and then we might change, we might not, we might decide that's the best way to do it, but those will be some of the decisions we make, but right now, it'll pretty much run through the county,
so to reiterate then, so everybody's clear over there, even though these entities are in municipalities, the funding will continue for them.
That is correct. There'll be no change. Now, internally, within the CRA, one of our early challenges is we have to develop a contract administration function. And that you'll see actually showing fairly shortly on the new organizational chart. We have to create that. Right now, Buncombe County's doing that. Because we want to develop that capability.
It just seems to me on the surface of it, the way you're doing it makes a lot of sense, because this board would have to get into the whole business of employee benefits, and spend a lot of time and focus on administrative processes that are already well established by the county. In terms of bang for the buck, it seems to me we're a lot better focused on mission and vision than we are on how to deal with employee issues. And we reimburse the county and let the county do what it does best. That's kind of where we did start personally, if I were thinking about it.
And I think that's back to fairness and safety.
Yes, and I think I can speak for the mission. I think everyone, we want this stay where it is. Now, if there's a change in any kind of funding, any kind of status quo, then I think that's a decision, something that we will decide, but we'll also do in conjunction with the county commissioner.
And just for comfort, we have funds, which are like having separate companies, and we have CRA set up as a separate fund, so that it's really a clear audit trail for you.
So thinking back about your request for budget at the end of February, if, and George's question about can we access whatever budget information you have on file for some of these entities like Pac Place or the Civic Center, the Cellular Center, some of those things. I'm assuming we could get our hands on those, but I'm also thinking that this board, certainly right after Christmas or right before, has got a responsibility to figure out a process to evaluate the current, particularly those cultural gifts, and a system or process for hearing requests. I mean, I've already gotten one of those calls from somebody not on this list. It's like, can we apply, and where do you have a form, and like, oh, wait.
Well, why don't you tell them how we did it last time?
Those
What
are
was
all
the process?
available from our budget department, Diane Price, and Ed if anyone can get in touch with Diane, get your information on last year's request from the people who are on this list. And then if there's somebody wanting to apply for funding, Diane Price is the person to call, but the forms are online so that they can apply and what they're required to provide along with their request. And it's not an easy application. We want to know what you're going to do with it. We want to know what percentage it is of your funding sources. We want to know that you've been audited. We want to know that we're funding a solid organization and buying something specific.
And last year, we had we actually had a public meeting, and how many people, do you remember that?
Goodness.
You remember?
So in my experience, because I do have a bit of experience about how other places handle this, this again was a piece of research that came after this one about nonprofit funding, which in essence, that's what you're talking about, is the cultural organizations that do this funding. It is this much of your budget and this much of your time.
Exactly. Yes. And I think any of the three commissioners there can tell you it's a very time-consuming process.
It was a 3-hour meeting.
So what you've got right now is already a process that is established, that there are some accountability issues that are already in place. You have a process for incorporating new applicants into this process, correct? But what you're saying is that this CRA would be responsible for actually making a recommendation about the total funding package as early as February to the county.
Yes.
So those, whatever that process is that we determine, really it has to happen between, say, January and February or something. I mean, we need to put that on the calendar.
It's already there. And so one of the things that I typically talk to folks when they talk about what is the process is something making it consistent with your vision and mission, which you don't even actually have yet. But why do you provide funds like this? Well, it's because there might be a variety of reasons, but these folks may do it in a better way. They may have better grassroots connections. They may have better understanding about what's needed. There are all kinds of reasons why you might do it this way. Lost my train of thought. Oh, but one of them, they should be consistent with whatever your vision and mission is, which you haven't established yet. So you've got a process already, but you don't really have your vision and mission yet. So how do you find that match? Just
And
on
then,
your list too.
as I look at this list, there are some entities that the commissioners implied funding for, 2 or 3 years or 5 years. So that would be another discussion, whether we continue to honor those obligations.
So how important is it for us to hire a full-time director before we get into this process? Perfect.
I don't know where to put it on the timeline. It's certainly something that you want to make sure is on the list.
Yeah.
But in a room.
We are going to bring on a person in early next month, and this will be a big part of that person's responsibility. So I think
Can you bring on a person for?
who in effect will be our overall budget and administration person. I think what you're looking at for this coming budget is we'll probably follow a process in terms of getting applications that's very similar to what we've done in the past. And then we will bring those to this board, and I think you're going to have to start in on that probably as early as January, which means we have to notify these agencies and tell them how to apply very quickly, because it's no no.
Are we talking about grants, or
We're talking about the grant piece, because I think that's going to occupy a large amount of this board's time.
So is this position that you're hiring, you said come out of CRA money?
Yes, that'll come out of CRA.
is that?
And frankly, one of the big pieces that we have to build is that contract administration piece. Who are they? Have they submitted the applications? Do we have the financial documentation and so forth? And then we have not really, I don't think even as the county, looked at very much on a compliance piece of this. In other words, did you do what you said you were going to do with the money we gave you? Well, that is where I see this board being very active.
We actually, on many of them, on subculture and recreation, it's not as specific as others, but for human services, we have them actually under contract for these funds. So that's something you might want to look at that process too for culture and recreation. Some of it, like Pack Place, we've funded for years. We don't have a specific performance criteria on that.
There's a whole host of things you have to decide in that regard in terms of accountability and measures, et cetera.
Can I go back to this, another question about the leadership, which I wasn't aware of? You're the interim director of this authority, right?
Yes.
And you're appointed, just so I understand it, you're appointed by the county commissioners.
No, I was appointed by the county manager.
County manager,
Yeah.
okay. And so you're interim, so what's going to happen next? You said there's going to be somebody else coming on who's going to be the financial, administrative.
This will be an operations manager position,
Okay.
and this particular piece is going to fall into that position.
And where would they be in our chart?
They would be, if you were to draw a line, they would be number 3. So Fran and I as program would be 1 and 2, and then this person would be 3.
And this year, it is operating as a county department, so we're trying to structure so that,
Right.
that you have what you need.
So if this board wanted to be involved in that leadership decision now or down the road, how does that work?
We will, I think we're going to have, how many employees will the CRA? Well, no, if we lease from the county, we won't have any employees. No, we'll have a director. I think it does say in the, let me see. I think in our, again, going back to our authorizing, I think it says shall. Oh, it says the general powers shall be to appoint a full-time director. So we shall appoint a director. It's not, that's going to be one employee we're going to have directly, no matter how we've structured the remaining employees. Is that the way you read it?
Yeah, and
That's what I thought.
that person can still be, quote, a technical county employee from the administrative standpoint, but he or she has to report to this board.
Yes,
So
it
we
does
have-
not say hire, it says shall appoint, yes.
So we have the ability to either, I guess, look internally or externally for that director role, is that right? Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
Matt wants to do it yesterday.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how, if the CRA, we are currently running where the county is running everything pretty much the way it was until we get our stuff together. Is it somebody already doing that position? And where did the money come from to hire that person?
Right now, Fran and I are sharing those responsibilities. was doing.
So there was nobody currently?
Library director, recreation group. And for the most part, we're satisfied that that's working reasonably well. We do know there's a need to strengthen that administrative piece that would be the joint aspects of the CRA. So that's what we're working on now. As far as the interim, I still have on my email, I'm the authority transition manager. I'm anticipating that role as lasting the rest of the current fiscal year, which is June 30, because we're operating in essence as a county department. So that, I think, in the next few months would be a matter of this board to discuss. But right now, it's in essence, Fran and I are doing that work.
Well,
That's good.
So there are a couple, I heard you say that. I covered that about 3 times, and I'm like, which piece of that? So you said somebody already doing that, meaning what?
Contract administrative work that you're hiring this person for. I'm just curious if this was if it was in the current county budget to hire this person, and if it wasn't, and they're expecting the CRA to reimburse them for this position, and is that somebody then that we take on? I'm just curious how that works.
It's actually part of the current budget. It's not additional cost to the CRA.
Okay.
And again, I think that this is an important assumption that I want to make sure you understand what I'm understanding, is that for the next 6 months or 7 months, the balance of the fiscal year that we're in now, we're really in a transitional state. We're a county department. We're going to keep operating 99% of the time as a county department. The CRA piece, what will be the new entity, is gradually going to be built. So some things that look extremely urgent now, there's actually the pre-existing processes are all still there. We have the opportunity to build new processes as we see the need. So I think that the assumption that we as staff are working on right now is we're essentially a county department through June 30. The evolutionary piece of that is going to go on. In other words, the direction that we're going to go in as an authority is something we're going to be working on in the next months.
That's a great situation. You've got the stability and transition
Yeah.
that you can rely on. That's a real gift. Rather than having all this stuff hitting us in the face.
Yeah, and I think frankly, just speaking for staff, the sanity factor right now very much hinges on that, because we are all long-term county employees. Those are the processes that we understand and we work in. We now know we're going to develop some new processes, but we don't feel like we're going to be to the head that you will do this today.
Well, the foundation for stability is there.
I would like to offer that I think it will be important when this board gets to the place of vision or whatever, or thinking about value-added work or needs assessment and prioritization, that it would be really good to have an executive director or that CEO person on board to share that expertise and be a part of those discussions so they can feel ownership of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a great opportunity there to work in tandem with Ed and Fran. Because I think you guys are doing a great job and I'm really grateful.
Very great.
Just saying. Really great.
One of the things I'm struggling with is when does that decision, I mean, I know you want it yesterday, and if you're talking about that hire being part of those discussions, I've got a timeline, I'm still trying to figure out where to put that up there. So in the sequencing of things, if that makes sense to hire before all those things happen, what's the time frame when you want to put that up there?
Well, I think that would be a call for us. And we just want to get you all the information we can. And I don't know there's good answers. We can't decide today, or we shouldn't decide today. I'd say, early on. It's an early on decision that this board will have to make, a policy decision, and how we do that. And we can do it in consult with the personnel director of Buncombe County, Rob Thornberry. I don't think we haven't put anything out there saying there might be a position, because I think this board has to say what the position, kind of hunt it down a little bit more as to what we want.
But is there agreement on Karen's suggestion in terms of the sequencing? In other words, that what I just heard you say is that hire needs to happen before this vision is sort of out there and developed.
I just think they need to be a part of that.
Yeah.
To
So
embrace
the
it.
sense is that feels like one of the, it's not the very first thing, because the funding process apparently must be the very first thing. But it's one of the next things.
You could start on doing
What's
some
that?
drafting of a position, description, those sorts of things, begin to start defining it in draft form, so that at some point in the next few months, we can really begin to firm that up. I do agree with you. I think if you can get your executive leadership in place and part of the process early as you're going through your development of concept, you're better off than having them come in after it's already decided. Anyways,
I like that suggestion, and I agree with you that we don't have to do that today. But in my mind, somewhere in that first quarter of the year is when this person ought to join us. So I think that gives us time to develop and look at resources. I'm talking about who we need help from in order to find that, because I don't do all those things. Right, job description, the interview process, work with Wanda and staff to make sure everything is as it should be. And Fran, and for me, that's a target, say March 1. Or, that's specific.
Well, I'm seeing nods around the head, and then I'm seeing something back here at this back table, but I'm not sure, Wanda, if there was something you wanted to say.
And we're happy, we have a human resources director to come and have him meet with y'all, and y'all start going through what you're looking for in that individual, so that he can help you get the job description written. And
We can do it before, is what you're
oh
saying.
yeah, I mean, you can do it
Do it by
as soon as y'all want.
And you're talking first quarter-ish, though, of the new year.
On board first quarter.
On board?
On board.
I think
Then you gotta
best case
start
scenario
now.
would be-
Yeah.
You gotta start now.
Huh?
It's a long process. I think the best case scenario is to be after the new year. There's no way we can do it.
Well, and let me just go for what Matt's saying. You know, we do need to set a time to do this and a frequency of meetings. And I would suggest we kind of bounce around the different facilities so we get familiar. Ed came up with that. We had some conversation. If that's okay, but just to kind of jump ahead a little bit, that would, if we met monthly, that would be 2 meetings, one in November, one in December. We may need to meet more than that to set this up.
We meet twice a month until we get going.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so since 3, I don't know your schedules, and I don't know if it's appropriate time to bring this up, or should we, because I know that's an issue, how many times we're gonna have to flesh these things out.
Yeah.
These are great, they're really hitting the heart of where we need to be.
I don't necessarily want to come to a decision, I just kind of want to get something out there, but I do think at the end, by 3 o'clock, we need to kind of come to some decisions, yeah. So, but I'm hearing support for more than once a month, at least initially.
And
The first and third Thursday mornings.
that Tuesdays are pretty critical for me. They're really critical.
Before we do that, let's ask if there are any other clarifying questions we wanted to ask around what was in this notebook, because that's what this time was about. What else do we need to understand? I've been trying to kind of take some notes here about asset ownership, funding, facilities, employees, and then the authority, which we had sort of the legal authority, we kind of got set on where that comes from, right? The employees, in my mind, will be supported by the county government, there's no transfer. This group appoints the director, and the director reports to the CRA. So that's kind of the employee chunk of conversation that I heard. There may be more. And then this notion about facilities, we haven't even really touched. And then the funding, clearly around allocating funding for other cultural organizations outside of the county, that's a piece that falls to you all. And then the collection and monitoring, all that doesn't, it's done by the county. So there, right?
We collect the money, yes. Through the
And
next part.
pardon me?
Are you asking, are we collecting the money? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's really, this is the biggest funding piece that this group has to worry about, is the outside agency, the other cultural, supportive other cultural organizations. And then asset ownership, it's kind of all over the place.
No, I think we worry about all of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
half the budget is the public library, you've got 2 million that's existing recreation, those are the biggest pieces. So this piece, the community funding, is part of the budget, but it's not.
These recommendations then are for all of these pots of money.
My understanding
Yeah.
is that, yes, this board would be recommending the entire budget, so that would be how much is for library programs, how much for recreation programs, greenways, et cetera. So it's a big, that whole roughly $10 million pot is largely in existing programs now. So if you're talking about the community funding piece of it, you're looking at 10% of that pot. Okay?
One of the things that the county does for all our departments is basically there are X number of employees who are employed by a department. We send out all the costs associated with them so that you don't have to set and figure all those things. Then we send out historically what your line items have been in operating expenses so that you have a really good starting place. You're not starting from scratch. You have some information that helps you determine how to move forward.
Any other questions yet about what?
I have a question because I've been asked this question. What is the status of the CRA as an authority legally? Is this a nonprofit? Is it a,
It's a government.
how do you describe, I mean, we use the word, Lynn was talking earlier about experience with nonprofits and that sort of thing. Is there tax status? Is there not? What?
It is a unit of government, and you do have tax numbers. In fact, we're applying for all those for you, but basically you're not a nonprofit. You're a unit of government, like a fire department would be, or MSD.
MSD is a great example of what a public authority is. So it is a unit of local government. It has essentially the powers that a local government unit has, other than the ability to tax. So it's not a nonprofit. There's a clear distinction.
I think we're at a breaking point. I mean, a point to break, not breaking. I guess what I'm thinking is, I'm hungry, and others might be too. And if there's, so this is the question: is anything else in terms of information clarification for right now? Otherwise, I'm sure we'll keep asking questions.
I would just add to the question, the good question the group had about the municipality assets. If we could add NAPs in their budgets, so even though we don't control that, I think it's good information to have as we do our thing.
I'm sorry, what is the question?
Add to responsibility, the green one, the fourth down,
Yeah.
add maps and budgets to that, because even though it's a municipality function, I think we should still have that information so that we could do our job. I think it would be good for doing our job to know what they're doing also. It should be public record, so I don't think it'd be hard.
I have a question.
What is our relationship, working or otherwise, with other existing boards, like the library board and the Parks and Rec board, and how do we work with those folks? That's internal versus that cultural.
So, and those are the board of county commissioner appointed boards, board commissioners?
And they become advisory board?
Yes.
Advisory
Yeah, in the part where we took it up, we basically, the Board of Trustees of Asheville Buncombe, this is in section 10 of the one that Buncombe County did our ordinance. We disbanded the Board of Trustees of the library, and the respective members of these boards are transferred to the Board Authority as advisory committees. And we specifically said it's the intent of our Board of Commissioners to relinquish any formal authority they have over to the board and leave future decisions to the advisory and us. So actually, the library was regulatory.
The library board was a statutory board that had some real regulatory authority.
And so we've disbanded that, and it's all transferred, this advisory transferred to us, and there is no, that's another decision this board will make about our relationship with the members of the now disbanded boards, both Parks and Rec and Library.
Well, that was my question, is how would we work, because I want to hear from those
Well,
folks.
the way I'm reading it right now is, in effect, this board has assumed the responsibilities of the library. If in the future, this board decides it wants a library advisory committee, it has the authority to do that. But I think what happened here is that this board has taken those powers and responsibilities of the library.
But didn't we leave those in place as advisory board?
Yes.
So
We wanted to have the best of all. We wanted you
Right.
to make, this board, us seven, to make the decision on how to use them without having, well, just to give us maximum flexibility. We can
we
reinstitute,
can meet with them periodically.
and should, very
Yeah,
early
yeah,
on. I agree
yeah.
with Karen, we need to meet. with
And is
both
there a
boards.
Parks and Rec advisory?
There was one that was appointed, and they've not met in a few months, waiting for, to see where we're headed forward. But there's not currently an active one, no.
But they're waiting in the wings, so.
They're waiting to hear, yes.
Okay.
But officially, they have been disbanded
Yes.
as any kind of regulatory advice. That's fine.
So, other boards and commissions, that relationship, nothing in place with Parks and Recreation. This CRA has assumed the regulatory powers that the library board had, but they've been left in place as an advisory board awaiting instructions.
And the same with Parks and Rec.
Both of them, yeah.
Yeah, both
Yeah.
of them.
But in Parks and Recreation, I heard there's actually not an active board in place.
That's correct. When this board, when the CRA legislation started, that board went on hold until, so they've not met in several months.
But there's
there are-
still
there
a
are
place.
people. Yeah,
There's still people there, yes.
yeah.
So are there any other related boards that we should be aware of?
On the library side, there are multiple Friends of the Library groups. So virtually every branch library has Friends organization.
And we have, how many libraries?
There are 12.
12. And there's a good
And
map.
there's 10 of them, 10 of those 12 have active.
The maps are really good.
This is a great map, and it's got details on the other side of where things are, where the libraries are, where the parks are. As we,
So how many parks are there, Fran?
There's a multiple of pools that are associated with parks, but there's approximately 24.
24 parks and 12 libraries.
And how many pools?
There are 5 outdoor pools and an indoor pool, and those are associated with parks.
Right, okay, gotcha.
and remember, this does not include the municipal,
Correct.
which operates separately, Black Mountain and,
Woodfin has some parks. City of Asheville certainly has a multitude of parks, and those are the 3 that I.
and that's what Joe was talking about. He was saying, put everything on top.
Right.
So that, because again, they're not gonna kick you out of a city park
Right.
because you live in District 2.
Right,
you know.
right, right.
That's something,
Right.
we hope not, anyway.
Like, I live outside of the limits of town, of Black Mountain, but I still get to go play town hall.
What are our lunch instructions?
All right, lunch is available in the community activities room down the hall, so it's the glass room on the left. And you serve yourself, correct?
So it's 12:15. I'm going to suggest a half hour of nothing but lunch. That's a good question. Is it secured in here?
I can lock it, yeah. I would. Is that agreeable?
So at 12:45, well, actually, I have a little bit later than that. 12:50 when we continue.